A group dedicated to ending taxpayer-funded animal experiments named the White Coat Waste Project has released several blog posts accusing the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, directed by Fauci, of needlessly and expensively performing torturous experiments on beagles. Blog 1 contains info on the 4 experiments/studies. Starting first with how the White Coast Weight Project presented them. Study 1. The NIAID wasted $18,430,917 to test infected flies on beagle puppies. Study 2. The NIAID spent $424,455 on beagles that were given experimental drugs and then infested with flies carrying parasites. One group of dogs are vocalizing in pain during experiments, and that the dogs will be euthanized at the end of them, even though the test had already been done on mice, gerbils, and macaws. Study 3. Fauci's NIH department shipped part of a $400K grant to a lab in Tunisia to drug beagles, lock them in cages filled with infected flies. Study 4. NIAID spent $1.68 million on drug toxicity tests on dogs and other animals before putting them down, and that the dogs also had their vocal cords cut. Blog 2 basically just adds receipts to prove the puppies were purchased and put down. So what's the truth? Well, to start, the White Coast Weight Project, despite clearly blaming Fauci, admits that it doesn't even know if Fauci ever personally ordered any of these studies. Study 1. The study was designed to create a vaccine for a type of mosquito's saliva, which is thought to be important in the life cycle of the malaria parasite. It frankly doesn't show anything abnormal for what this kind of study is, and that the $18 million project is based on yearly studies since 2003, each year costing about $1 million, which is around what it costs to run a study filled with animals, dozens of researchers, and lots of complicated disease interactions that need to be carefully controlled. Thanks to this study, the researchers have confirmed it's safe to move on to human vaccine trials. Study 2. This study was designed to test a potential vaccine for a parasitic disease called lymphatic filariasis, which the Center for Disease Control and Prevention lists as the world's second leading cause of permanent and long-term disability in humans. Dogs were the best models for testing the vaccine because they are a natural host for the mosquito-transmitted parasite, and because they respond to the infections in a similar way to humans, and the vaccine would also likely help dogs as well. Lisa Moses, a veterinarian at Harvard Medical School's Center for Bioethics, such a practice is common at the end of research studies involving animals. Greg Trevor, University of Georgia spokesperson, says beagles are the standard dog model used in this type of research. Because this disease currently has no cure, unfortunately the animals that are part of this trial must be euthanized. We do not take lightly the decision to use such animals in some of our research. Study 3, and probably the most famous one with its image going around the internet most, the NIAID never even paid for this study. The journal that published the study, PLOS Neglected Tropical Diseases, confirmed its mistake, writing that the NIH did not provide any funding for this research and any such claim was made in error. The NIAID did fund a separate project in Tunisia to test a potential vaccine for parasitic disease transmitted to sandflies, but the study involved immunizing 12 dogs and letting them roam around in an enclosed open space set up to mimic natural settings. The dogs were not sedated, not trapped in cages, or fed to the flies. Paper notes in its methods section that it used 6 beagles that had been naturally infected with the L infantum as part of a different study to investigate the efficacy of a vaccine against K9. The animals had served as the unvaccinated control group in the 12-dog study. Study 4, the NIAID said the tests were to assess the pharmacology and toxicology of potential therapeutics targeting HIV and AIDS, which matches the Washington Post report on the study. The cordectomies are completely legal and to prevent hearing loss of the researchers. However, the American Veterinary Association says that such devocalization should not be used as an alternative to appropriate animal management and facility design in laboratory settings. So it unfortunately seems like the cordectomies were not absolutely necessary and is possibly something worth looking into. Now for the third blog. This blog states that the Wuhan Institute of Virology did gain-of-function research on animals. Now, it is true that the NIH did give money to the US-based EcoHealth Alliance that was awarded a grant in 2014 to look into the possibility and danger of coronaviruses from bats. In 2014, EcoHealth received $3.7 million from the NIH and gave $600,000 of it to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The project was pulled in April 2020 following the outbreak of the coronavirus by Trump. So where are people like Ron Paul getting this idea that gain-of-function research was done? Well, Ron frequently likes to quote, Professor Richard Ebright of Rutgers University. Ebright told BBC that the research in both papers showed new viruses that did not exist naturally were created, and these risk creating new potential pathogens that were more infectious. The research in both papers was gain-of-function research, he said. He added that it met the official definition of such research outlined in 2014. But what was Fauci's response to that? Well, during the Senate hearing, here's what he said. The research in question has been evaluated multiple times by qualified people to not fall under the gain-of-function definition. He also said it was molecularly impossible for these viruses to have resulted in the coronavirus. So what actually happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology? The project was to examine at the molecular level newly discovered bat viruses and their spike proteins, which help the virus bind to living cells without affecting the environment or development or physiological state of the organism. And one of the scientists who actually worked with the Wuhan Institute, Director Rolf Barrick from the University of North Carolina, gave a very detailed statement to the Washington Post. The work at the time was reviewed by the NIH and the university's own Biosafety Commission for potential of gain-of-function research, and were deemed to be not gain-of-function. And on top of that, none of the viruses which were even being looked at in the 2015 study were related to SARS-CoV-2, which caused a pandemic. He does add, though, that it showed that the viruses had intrinsic properties giving them the ability to infect humans. But he also adds, we never introduced mutations into the virus spike to enhance growth in human cells. So, finding out that the viruses can infect humans does not mean you made them infect humans. And some people will cite, well, why was the funding stopped in 2014 by the government? Well, actually, no funding was stopped. The government just gave a warning. The warning regarded research that may be reasonably anticipated to confer attributes to an influenza, MERS, or SARS viruses, such that the viruses would enhance pathogenicity and or transmissibility in mammals via the respiratory route. This could imply that research on viruses may not intend to produce gain-of-function, although that could be the end result of it. But as US researcher and biologist Alina Chan at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard points out, this was only a policy related to new funding, not ongoing funding or even any research. Basically, it had no teeth regarding research that was happening anywhere, including in the US, even if it was funded by federal dollars. So a warning and a new implementation of a policy does not mean there was something wrong going on already. So what does this all mean? Well, basically, GOP members that have historically hated Fauci are using this as a chance to attack him more. The studies are incredible examples of progress and will likely lead to many lives being saved. Unfortunately, we do not have better alternatives than animal testing, and there are a lot of steps and measures in place to ensure ethics are followed and unnecessary cruelty does not take place already. I think it behooves us all, especially our own congresspersons, to maybe check what the intentions of the sources you're getting this information from are. In this case, it happens to be a group completely dedicated to the end of using any animals in any form of research whatsoever. And they happen to be willing to completely distort and mislead the public to meet that goal.